When a market is turning south and the propaganda media is still spitting out garbage, bankers are in the process of selling off their risky bets and attempting to make a hefty profit. Traders will play either way, just excited for the volatility. Today, as it stands, the deceleration has already begun. In fact, as of 2008, the markets have been stagnant. We know this specifically because without QE from the Fed, the market hasn't gone anywhere. That's an absolute, undeniable fact. Who will be there to accept the fault of the disaster this time? You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we will get into the global finance officials promising to use, quote, all tools to boost growth. So let's begin right here, starting off with this article talking about the GDP. Look at this. The United States has now gone a record 10 straight years without 3% growth in its GDP numbers. And we're talking fraudulent GDP numbers. So what does that tell you? Well, 3% growth in their statistics, not mine, but in their view, 3% growth is sort of that point where above 3% growth is a good stimulation in the economy and below that is perhaps a concern. And this is what they look at. So they see these numbers and they judge them accordingly, saying, well, you know what, 10 years from now, or in the past 10 years, we haven't had 3% growth. So what does that tell you about the strength of the economy of these 10 years? So obviously we know what this is all adding up to. Finance officials of the world's biggest economies promised Saturday to use, quote, all tools to shore up sagging global growth and to avoid devaluing their currencies to boost exports, but made no pledges of joint action. So it's interesting. Initially, when I read this, I believed that would mean more money printing, but at the same time, they said they're not going to devalue their currencies. I do believe, however, that they can suggest to the public that printing money will not devalue their currencies, and that's what they mean by that. But there are many other things they can do. They can use TARP-type bailouts. They can do anything. They don't have to necessarily go ahead and do a money printing scheme. And there's quite a bit to this article here. Basically, the G20 and others got together and said that they, quote, need to do more to boost growth. That's right. Don't fix the problem. We need to intervene more. That's the way I see this. And they basically promised a growth-friendly tax and spending policies. Let me just explain something for the few on here who don't understand this. There's no such thing as a growth-friendly tax. You can't have growth with excessive taxation. In fact, this is generally what the empires do, is that they continually increase the taxation on the public to the point where they will revolt or something bad has to happen. At the very bottom, even China's finance minister saying this: we agreed to use all tools, monetary, fiscal, and structural, to boost growth. That shouldn't surprise anybody. Look at this. It's right away, it begins with propaganda. This is out of the Wall Street Journal. The recession is over. This is where I insert my laugh right here. But it's certainly not forgotten. Across most of the U.S., unemployment last year remained elevated compared with 2007 levels in more than 2/3 of the states. Very interesting to see that, because when you measure it as a whole, they show it declining. But when you measure it in a different way, well, that's not exactly the case. Even so, the average annual unemployment rate in the 36 states plus D.C. in 2015 were higher than the average unemployment rate for those states in 2007. The recession began in December 2007, ended in 2009. I love how they just throw that propaganda out there every chance they get. it's interesting to note, to sort of see that, they can claim the unemployment rate is below 5%, but is that really a number of significance, even if it was true? Because it shows you how the national rates of unemployment are not necessarily as important about particular areas. Let's move on. Deutsche Bank. Gold is still expensive, but rising economic risks and market turmoil mean investors should buy it for insurance. That's according to them directly. Look at this quote. There are rising stresses in the global financial system, in particular, the rising risk of a U.S. corporate default cycle and the risk of a sharp one-off renminbi devaluation due to the sharp increase in China's capital outflows. Deutsche Bank added, buying some gold as insurance is warranted. When do you ever hear a bank coming out and saying buy some gold as insurance? They never suggest gold. This is very interesting to me, and I just wanted to bring it out to you as well. MarketWatch, the annual pace of U.S. economic growth in the fourth quarter was marked up slightly to 1%. 1% lie. But that was mainly because of a bigger stockpiling of inventories that could weigh on the economy in early 2016. And then just to cover this before I get into my point, the government last month initially reported that the gross domestic product, the value of everything a nation produces, has expanded at a 0.7% rate. This is more accurate to what we've seen in the past. I mean, it wasn't that long ago before they claimed one of the quarters was 5% growth. Where in the world are they getting 5% growth from? It's a joke. Now let's just look at this diagram from my book. You've probably seen this before, but essentially what we have is a diagram of the GDP, what it equals, and it's a simplified diagram here. Obviously, it's not going to show you everything, but essentially what we have is the GDP equaling government spending plus consumption plus investment plus exports. And this right here just goes to show a very basic outline of what that is. So when you have all of these things here, all very important things, equaling in their measurements to under 1%, what does that tell you about the state of the economy? This is a very simplified version, as I've said, but look at it and think, if your economy, all of this stuff, is actually growing at less than 1% per year, what is the status of the economy? Let's look at this. Out of The Guardian, Japan's population has fallen by nearly 1 million, according to new statistics, the first decline since the official census records began in the 1920s. There's more for you if you want to read it, but all I want to suggest is that when a nation runs into any problems where there's demographics or anything else like this, they're going to have a big problem because governments rely on those people to pay their taxes, to steal their money out of their bank accounts using inflation or even using other methods like the bail-ins. What if they don't exist anymore? Where are you going to steal that money from? This is the problem I see, not just in Japan, but other countries as well. Then we head over to South America and look at Venezuela, growing closer to exhaustion, nearly every means of paying its debt. Some oil market participants are seriously pondering the possibility of unprecedented event, the default of a major crude producing company. This could get very messy for Venezuela. Their gas, their oil, is really their most important commodity by far. A default could curtail some of the OPEC members' exports by crippling its ability to import crude and fuels used to blend its extra heavy oil. Experts and sources say it could also degrade the quality of domestic gasoline by limiting purchases of necessary components. They are in a heaps of trouble at this time, and I highly recommend looking into Venezuela and seeing what could happen to a nation in a very short period of time. That's what's important about them. And then this here, which I wanted to bring out and which I'm not going to be able to cover because it quite frankly upsets me very, very much. I feel like cursing, to be quite honest. So I'm just going to cover it and I'm going to move on to the end of the video. A bill introduced in the State House would require the reporting of non-vaccinated students to the Colorado Department of Health and Environment. Currently, those health records are kept with the school. And that, just reading it really upsets me very much. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. And last but not least, if you found the video informative, I know you'll find my book, The Money GPS, more informative. And you can head over to Amazon and look through it for yourself. Take care.